Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us for today's SCORE webinar in partnership with Spectrum on successful small business pricing strategies with Tim Contado and Carolyn Katz. For this webinar, you are in listen-only mode, meaning that your audio is on mute. We do recommend that you maximize your Zoom window for an optimal experience. We will have opportunities for Q&A. You may submit your questions at any time via the Q&A at the bottom of your Zoom window, and we will respond to your question, take your questions, as many of them as we can, when we pause for Q&A. We are going to send you again the slides as well as the webinar recording. With that, I'm going to turn things over to SCORE mentor Tim Contado to tell you a little bit about SCORE New York City. Thank you, Kendra.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the 6th webinar for Spectrum Business Insights, Ideas to Empower Today's Business Owners. This one is entitled Successful Small Business Pricing Strategies. As Kendra had mentioned, my name is Tim Contado, and I'm not only one of your presenters today, but I've also been a certified SCORE mentor for the last 5.5 years. And it really is in that vein that I'd like to take this opportunity to tell you a little bit about the SCORE Association. Sometimes known as the Advisors to America's Small Business, SCORE is a nonprofit association comprised of over 10,000 volunteer business counselors in over 325 chapters throughout the US and its territories. In existence for over 55 years, SCORE mentors are trained to serve as counselors and mentors to aspiring entrepreneurs and business owners. SCORE chapters offering mentoring services, workshops, and webinars, similar to the one obviously that you're about to see, advisory board services for more established businesses, business owner roundtables, also which serve as peer networking groups for entrepreneurs, and finally, information resources like templates and instruction booklets through their websites. SCORE mentors are experienced business executives with specialties and expertise in a variety of disciplines, like marketing, finance, accounting, and many other fields. They are available to help businesses in all stages of businesses development, whether it be pre-startup, startup, or even ongoing concerns. And as such, SCORE mentors are trained and encouraged to develop ongoing relationships with their clients, meaning more than one-time sessions, but hopefully a series of follow-up sessions to help promote your success. So you may be asking yourself, how do I avail myself of the free help offered by SCORE? Well, first of all, you can request a mentor by going to www.score.org and clicking Find a Mentor. Enter your zip code, fill out a mentor request form, and a mentor will reach out to you to schedule a session. It's easy as 1, 2, 3, really. So the New York City chapter of SCORE is pleased to partner with Spectrum Business to bring you this series of training webinars. I invite you also please to share on social media any of the webinars that you feel will benefit your friends and colleagues. As such, I'd like to thank Spectrum Business for underwriting the series of webinars. And in that vein, Jennifer Ingram, Vice President of Marketing, Small and Medium Business, who normally will actually read us a message today. I'll just go ahead and have her speak.
Thank you, Tim. Hi, my name is Jennifer Ingram. I'm the Vice President of Marketing with Spectrum Business, and you may know that we provide internet, voice, TV, and mobile solutions to small businesses across 41 states. I just wanted to say that we at Spectrum Business are really pleased to be working with SCORE and to be sponsoring today's small business workshop. We share the same goal in that we want to help small businesses thrive. We understand that small businesses are the backbone of the country's economy. And in many communities, small businesses are really the glue that holds the community together. I know that from my community, that's absolutely the case. And many of my favorite places to go in my community are the small businesses that I patronize. That's why we're sponsoring the workshop that's brought to you by SCORE. It's really important for us to help small businesses get the support that they need to start their business, to grow their business, and to be successful. So I just wanted to thank you for attending today's session, and on behalf of the entire team at Spectrum Business, we really hope that this is valuable to you. Thanks again, Tim.
Thank you, Jennifer. And I'll just say this is one of a series of 6 webinars that Spectrum sponsored in conjunction with SCORE. And you can find that information on the web and view those replays. So I will put that in the chat if you want to access the other webinars that we offered in the series. So today's webinar is going to be 2 parts. First, pricing strategies with Tim Contado, and then pricing and profitability with Carolyn Katz. So let's go ahead and dive in the art of strategic pricing with Tim.
Thank you, Kendra. Let me just go ahead and get my screen. So thank you again. All right. So basically, just as Kendra was saying, the part that I'm really going to talk about will be, the strategic part of it. And what Carolyn will cover will be pricing and profitability for all of you business owners. What I wanted to do, just to give you an idea of what I'll be discussing, will be, I'll talk about pricing and consumerism to start. Then I'll discuss a little of the strategic pricing steps that beginning businesses can take on. And then I'll discuss some price adjustment considerations for those of you who have ongoing businesses. And then I'll close out with some interesting items for you to know. I just wanted to remind everybody, I'll be covering a lot of material right now, and just wanted to remind everyone that Kendra will be sending this webinar out to those who have registered. So you don't need to worry too much about following along and taking notes. But of course, feel free to take notes if it helps you. In any case, the importance of price. The key for all of this is, let's acknowledge that choosing the right pricing strategy strengthens your chance of achieving product turnover and getting profit in line with your company's objectives. The truth of the matter is, even at this stage, that sometimes getting it wrong can be painful, okay? You see, first impressions are very, very important for pricing. Oftentimes, price creates the first impression of the quality of a product or service, or other value-based judgments can come later. As this chart here will show, pretty much a large percentage of people will form their opinion of a product or a service that within, as it says, within what, 7 seconds or so, okay? And so along those veins, what I wanted to do was talk about, comparative pricing exercise, and we'll be doing an exercise after this. This here is, a parka that's usually very popular in colder climates. It's what I call it, the New York City winter uniform. It is that company's most popular parka, cold resistant, rated to -22 Fahrenheit. It's waterproof and weatherproof, and it's priced at about $1,300 US. Okay, so as a poll question for those of you in this group, what I wanted to ask you was, how much do you think this particular parka here goes for? It's not as well known, not as effective against the cold. It's made out of cotton, and it's not weatherproof. Okay, go ahead, Kendra.
Yes, so go ahead. You see the options. I popped up the poll. So let us know how much you think the jacket is. And we will wait a moment so that people can submit their responses. And hopefully you didn't see the preview that Tim just showed you. Okay. I'm going to give it just a little bit longer because we have a lot of responses coming in. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and close that poll and share the results.
Well, despite my bofo right there, Kendra, thankfully enough, we can see that most of the people who were on the call just showed that, it looks like about 70% of you feel that this jacket sold for less than $500. 19% of you were thinking it sold for less than $1,000, and so forth. And then 2 of you who are highly, highly observant noticed or felt that it went for above $5,000. So I will reveal to you the price of this parka. Okay. So it's going for $5,940. Now, the next poll, Kendra, is that something that I just go to that next page and you run the next poll?
Yes.
Okay. So what was the effect of that price after I revealed it on your impression of, this product? You can just go ahead and click, as many of the buttons that apply to you.
Yes, and I think you want to move the slide forward, Tim.
Oh, okay, all right.
Okay, we got a lot of responses coming in. So we are going to give it just a little bit longer. Again, select all the choices, all the options that apply to you. What was the effect of this pricing? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close that poll and share the results.
Now, it's interesting that just the pricing itself upon the reveal, we've got a lot of people, okay, wherein just the revelation of the price changed your perception. What was interesting to me, okay, is that 82%, we're wondering what was justifying the price, which in more cases than not will actually lead to looking up that brand, on the internet, 17%. Okay, the fascinating thing from my standpoint is for the respondents, there were only 10% of you who felt that the price itself did not really change your perception. And you felt that, oh my goodness, no, that shouldn't be worth almost $6,000, but I just wanted to do that exercise so that we can all acknowledge and understand the importance of the role that pricing has on your perception of a product, okay, or a brand. So the key from this perspective, right, is that we understand that pricing communicates the value positioning of a product, okay? It must be set in relationship to the value delivered, okay, and the perceived value perceived by the customer, more importantly, all right? The lower the price and the higher the perceived value, a company actually ends up missing on potential profits, okay? So price really should equal cost plus your profits. The best way to look at it, is to realize that it's going to cost you a certain amount of money to produce the product, okay? And then there is a price that people are willing to pay, customers are willing to pay. A big part here will really depend on your communication and your marketing to develop in the mind of the consumer what the value is for which they need to pay. If you don't do the communication and the marketing correctly, you might end up lowering your price, okay, for what you want to sell it for, which would end up resulting in missed potential profits from your standpoint. One way that I'd like to look at it is I'd like to go through a pyramid called the elements of price value, all right, which is the Bain value pyramid. And what it is there are two links here. And when you receive them, you can go through each of them, because what they will do is they'll show you two videos without sound that will talk about each of these value propositions that deliver value to prospective customers. The key from your standpoint is to understand what are the values that I can bring to a customer or to a consumer. Are they functional? Are they emotional? Are they life-changing? Or is there a social impact from that perspective? The good thing about this value pyramid is it gives you examples, okay, of each of these points. And it also allows you to look for particular industries that might be applicable to you, to see what values are there that you have to deliver to a consumer to help them understand more than just the price. Okay. The other thing that's going to happen for those of you participating, okay, is I went ahead and I pulled all of these elements, not only from a B2B link, a business to business, but also a business to consumer link. And there is a worksheet that Kendra will be sending out to all the registrants of this webinar, wherein you get to look at each of the values, see what the value is to the consumer. Ask yourself, is that applicable to your business presently? But even more importantly, from some other standpoint, is you look at that value, okay, and see, is that a goal for your business in the future? Is that a value that you would like to deliver to the consumer or to the customer in the future? And if you're going to do that, how do you go about doing that? Okay, so that's how you use the Bain value pyramid for your business moving forward. Now we have to understand, okay, that when we're talking about pricing, customers will sacrifice their money, obviously, the amount of money, the source of it, the current financial situation that they find themselves in, and obviously just the type of work, to consider the kind of money that they have to bring in to buy something. And, the time, right? When they're thinking of buying, a product or a service. The important thing from that standpoint is they're trying to decide, just how much research they have to put into deciding whether or not your product or your service is what they need. How convenient is it for them? Okay. Is it a pleasurable transaction if they're actually going to buy a particular service? Are you going to be providing a good consumer service for them? These are the things that they have to consider a lot of times when they're deciding whether or not a product's price is the right thing or a service is good for them. Okay. From a cognitive perspective, they just also want to know when they're looking at a price. They're certainly going to be comparing the pricing to what they know presently. They're going to look at competitors, okay? Then a lot of times we used to call these white-knuckle decisions, okay? Sometimes the pricing will make a consumer decide whether or not, oh my gosh, is this really something that I need right now? Then of course there are decision rules from their perspective, which usually are just their budgets. And those are the constraints that they'll have to consider. Then there are behavioral aspects that have to come into play. because they're going to be thinking about, how will I be using that product or service? Okay, is this something that I really, really need to buy? Do I, when you were children, there are always these discussions that come up. Is that something you want, or is that something you need? Well, the truth of the matter is, from a lot of perspectives, from a behavioral standpoint, these are the considerations that we do as adults as well. Is it something we need to buy or not buy? Are there other options for us to get that product or their service? Do we need to rent it, or do we need to lease it? Or if it's a particular service, is that something for which I can hire somebody to do it for me? Or is it something that I can do myself? These all come into play when a person is considering whether or not to buy your product or your service. Okay. Because in the end, the consumer's cost, like I was just saying, is the money that they're going to be spending, the time, that they have to think about whether or not this is for them, the cognitive activity that they're going to go through, and the behavioral effort, plus the value that they assign, as I discussed in the Bain value pyramid, which in the end will equal the price that they're willing to pay, okay, from the consumer standpoint. From the producer standpoint, from your perspective, in the end, it's going to come down to your production costs, the amount of promotions that you're going to put into it, the distribution costs that you have, and any other costs for your business that have to come into play, plus the profit that you want to, pull in for your company will equal the price for which you're willing to sell your product or your service. Because in the end, all of this will come down to a transaction exchange equilibrium. These things have to tie up. A consumer's price expectations built on the categories that I mentioned earlier, has to equal the producer's price expectations, okay, the prices that you are willing to sell your service or your product for. And that will equal pretty much a transaction that's going to take place. Okay. Now, let's talk about some steps in setting pricing from your standpoint. One is you're going to have to estimate your costs, and Carolyn will go into a lot more detail about that. But that's certainly the starting off point from your perspective. You're going to have to go through some exercises to determine the demand for your product or your service. You will take some time to analyze your competitors' costs, their prices, and their offerings. Select your pricing objective, which I will discuss later on. Okay. Select your pricing method, which I will discuss later on as well. Finally, and then you will solidify your final price. Do you think that's it? That once you've solidified your price, that's it? No, actually, because pricing is not a static activity. You will need to take some time to reassess and revise as necessary, okay, as you're moving forward with your business. Another thing that you'll certainly have to keep in mind, okay, when you're setting the price for your product or your service, is you'll certainly have to look at price elasticity. Price elasticity basically means that changes in price will affect demand. The more dependent your product or your service is on price, the more price elastic it is. In other words, the more likely a consumer will change their behavior due to price, okay? The higher the price elasticity. Okay. So if there are few or no substitutes, it's very low price elastic, okay? In other words, it doesn't really matter sometimes what the price is. A person is going to buy your product or service if there are few or no substitutes. If buyers readily do not note price changes, okay, that's lower price elasticity. It's the same thing. I used to be the brand manager for Stouffer's, okay, and our prices ranged at the time, this is in the early 90s, from like $1.89 to $1.99. And one of the things we had to worry about was whether or not we actually could change our pricing to go above $2. I had to move it from $1.99 to $2.09. And this was a big part of it, okay? Because running through the experiments that I ran through, I realized that actually in that particular case, our consumers were pretty price sensitive. So it was very price elastic. I moved the pricing of mac and cheese, if you would, 10 cents, it would affect the demand of our product. Very price elastic, okay? Whenever your buyers are slow to change their buying habits, that means lower price elasticity. In other words, once people start buying your product and the pricing changes, but they refuse to move with the pricing, that means that you have low price elasticity. When buyers believe that higher prices are justified, you have lower price elasticity. The key for this whole exercise is really for you to understand what is the effect of pricing, okay, on the demand for your product or your service. Normally, higher prices equals lower demand, okay? So like I was just saying, you need to consider price sensitivity or price elasticity, which will take into account the necessity of your product or service, the substitute awareness of a buyer, okay, for competitive products. Okay. The end benefit to them, okay, is the expense small in relation to the total goal and the benefit that it brings to them. High cost obviously will equal higher sensitivity and vice versa. Lower cost, lower sensitivity to, to pricing changes just in general. The frequency of purchase will have a very big effect, okay, on your demand. The higher the frequency, the more sensitive they are to price changes. When people are buying something on a continuous basis and very, very frequently, they will notice, changes in pricing. Inventory effect. Can they store the product? If they can store the product, will they be as, sensitive to the price? Or because in other words, if they can store the product and they see that it's on sale, they'll go ahead and buy up a whole lot of it. All of us remember what it was like, when the COVID pretty much hit, because the inventory effect of toilet paper, just had an effect on how much we actually bought it. Okay. The unique value effect as well. Okay. Now this really just comes down to quality, exclusivity, and prestige, okay, of a product. In cases like that, for unique value effects, sometimes higher prices don't necessarily equal lower demand. It just means that people are willing to pay the higher prices for your product or service if they perceive that the quality is there, the exclusivity, and the prestige. Okay. So let's talk about selecting your pricing objective. Okay. The key here from this perspective is you want to decide, okay, do I set a product leadership position? That means, do I come in here and dictate, okay, that this is the pricing for a product or a service? And I set my product price accordingly. Do I want to maximize market share? Is my objective basically just to take as much of the market share from my competitors as possible? A lot of times then in that particular case, you will have to price accordingly, usually undercutting your competition. Survival, okay. In cases like this, if your objective is just to break even, you will then really have to price accordingly. Another one is to maximize profit. If you want to maximize profit, then of course you'll go ahead and set your pricing objective accordingly. Maximize market skimming. What this specifically means, okay, is realizing that what I can do, okay, is I can just go ahead and price my product low, okay, and eventually drive the market out, okay, to a point where I can actually start raising my price and really start driving profits from that standpoint. Okay. The key here really is to understand from your perspective, low quality, high price, you're skimming the market. Okay. High quality, low price is penetration pricing, meaning I'm going to go ahead and offer my high quality product at a low price so that I can get it into the marketplace. High product at a high price is obviously premium pricing. Okay. And then obviously here, low quality at a low price is pretty much just, an economic pricing strategy that you come in. All right. So as I was mentioning earlier, you can price at a premium, you can price for market penetration, you can price for economic or value pricing, and price skimming. And then of course, there's a whole part of psychology pricing, which is really a $9.99 instead of $10 strategy. Okay. Now, bundle pricing is also a strategy that you can bring into mind, and that is pretty much the opportunity of you to put selections of products together where 1 + 1 = 4 or 5, okay, at least in the mind of the consumer. So when you bundle products or services together, okay, you create that sense of value in the mind of the consumer, with bundled pricing strategies. The key also for a lot of us to understand is at this stage, we have to understand that products usually go through a product life cycle. We're in a lot of volume, at the introduction usually starts out low, and then as it starts to grow, you'll start to sell more products. Eventually you reach a point where you will hit a maturity level where the volume, the number of units of the products that you sell, top out at a particular point, at which stage then the volume will start to decline. Which is why normally when we start to price, you don't want to price low, okay, and increase, because what you really want to do, the best time for you to price high is really at the introductory cycle, okay? Because prices usually start higher and decline as the product reaches maturity. Because as you can see, when the product starts to mature, this is the time when you'll have to start decreasing your price, okay? Really, it's really on the decline side when you'll have to start decreasing your price so that you can sell more products, okay? Because it's very difficult to start prices low and subsequently increase them over time. So normally when you have a new product or a new service that you're introducing, your best bet for introducing it, the highest prices that you can, is usually best at the beginning, okay? In other words, like in this particular case, just as another summary, low quality, low price is economy. Okay, low quality at a medium price is a false economy part. A low quality product at a high price is a ripoff, essentially. Okay, and overcharging, high quality, high price, premium. Low price for a high quality product is a super value or a good value product. Okay, so these are the kinds of price quality strategies and relationships that you'll have to consider as you move forward. Now, what you want to do is take the opportunity to select a pricing method for yourselves as you move forward. As I'd mentioned earlier, you're going to be determining the break-even point, and Carolyn will be discussing that later. Determine your price markup that you want, and then look at the going rate pricing, which is usually competitive analysis. Assess from your standpoint the perceived value the consumer is going to get from your product and service. Then you go ahead and you solidify your pricing. Are you going to go for value pricing, premium pricing, et cetera, et cetera? Finally, consider your target return on investment, okay? And then, there's another way of doing it, which is auction pricing. Going ahead and offering the product out there, for open demand for the highest or best price possible. And then essentially you're going to reach a point where you determine the final price for your product. Okay, you'll solidify your pricing policies. You'll start thinking about your marketing, your advertising, and your communication. You'll go ahead, you lock in your price, and then you'll present it to your customers, okay, and consumers. And eventually you'll continue to monitor and adjust as necessary. And then finally, yay, you can celebrate. Because a big part of all of this, folks, okay, really will hinge on your advertising, your marketing, and communication. Because the whole idea of determining the value in the mind of the consumer will come down to your communication for them, all right? Because the things that you're going to have to do after you've solidified your introductory pricing is understand that once your business is ongoing, then you will also be looking at adjusting your pricing. Okay. You'll have to be thinking about competitive pricing because you'll have to compete on other value areas like service, et cetera. Cost-based pricing, which, from your standpoint, is that just going to be, based on your costs? And then, what is the premium going to put above that? Then you have to think about whether or not at some point you'll need to be a loss leader, which means you'll have to take some losses in order to, at least to sell some units of volume. Psychological pricing, which is a matter of, like I mentioned, just pricing your product in as $9.99 instead of $10, et cetera. Okay. Demand pricing, okay, which is, through examples like JetBlue, Ryanair, or budget airlines, okay, which is pretty much just putting the lowest pricing out there and letting the market determine, what the units of volume that they're going to buy. Competitive pricing, again, as I mentioned earlier. Bundle pricing, okay, which I talked about. And finally, skimming, which is really just trying to get as much profit as you can as you start out, okay. Then you want to start thinking about markdowns and seasonal pricing for those of you who have seasonal products or services, okay. Another way of really thinking about pricing strategies are your payment and your delivery terms, okay, that can make it friendly for your customers to do business with you. Because after that, you certainly will want to start thinking about price adaptation strategies for those of you on ongoing businesses. You want to start thinking about pricing discounts and allowances, promotional pricing to try to move volume, differentiated pricing, okay, which is pretty much talking about different qualities different features and benefits of your products and pricing accordingly. Okay. The key here, okay, is a lot of our clients who normally come up to me, always just want to talk about discounting. Okay. But the one thing I certainly want everybody here to understand, okay, is that perceptions matter. Okay, discounts, usually cause price wars. You start discounting, then your competitors start discounting, and so forth. And it's a no-win battle a lot of times. Discounts then usually end up leading to expectations. The best example of discounts leading to expectations is actually in the car industry. Okay, when most people end up waiting for the end of year sales for cars, it's because they've learned to expect that the best pricing that they can get is at the end of the year. That's because the discounts have basically led to those expectations. You want to be very careful about discounting as we move forward, because in essence, discounts really aren't fair for these very reasons up on top, all right? So the key from your standpoint, okay, is you really have to price discounts and allowances to have a strategic objective. You always want to have an objective when you do offer a pricing discount, okay? In other words, if you're going to offer a discount for something that benefits you, okay? Not necessarily just to move product. Like, for example, discount for early payment, give a discount for cash payment, give discounts for quantity or bulk purchases. Okay, a seasonal discount, and this one would be like a counter seasonal one. Okay, when things are out of season, give them, give a discount, and then allowances as well for the very same reason. Okay, the key here is really make sure that when you give discounts and allowances, there's for a very distinct objective on your side. And trade discounts are exactly the same thing. Okay, so you want to think about promotional pricing. Okay, special event pricing. Okay, cash rebates, again, for the same idea of just getting you, more cash, if you would. Low interest financing, longer payment terms to make it favorable for your customers or your consumers to do business with you. Okay, warranties and service contracts, which makes the value of them working with you more favorable than it would be, instead of working with your competitors. Sometimes you could position yourself as a loss leader in pricing to get them into the relationship with you. Some of the best examples of loss leader pricing is pretty much in any of the situations we're in. Normally you get locked into a cable channel program, because usually what they do is they'll take the losses right at the beginning to get you into the contract, hoping and wishing that you don't notice it when the prices start to increase after a time. Okay, they're willing to do that loss leader pricing for a very strategic reason to get you in. And then I've mentioned obviously the benefits of psychological pricing. Okay. The other thing that's going to happen at some point for those of you with ongoing business is you'll be thinking a little bit about initiating price cuts. Okay. Now, like before I'd mentioned, okay, you don't just initiate price cuts just because you want to. You have to have some justification for them. What justifies price cuts? Sometimes when you have excess capacity, all right? When you've got competition that are really breathing down your neck, okay? And obviously just aggressive pricing from your standpoint. You want more distribution. You want to put the customers out, okay? Or sorry, your competitors out. But you have to watch out that when you take on pricing cuts, okay, you have to think about the customer reaction to that. And normally they'll start to think, oh my goodness, there's new models upcoming, so I'm not going to buy this right away. I may as well just wait. Or sometimes they can think, maybe these existing models aren't selling very well, or maybe there are some quality issues, okay, that are going on, and that's why they're taking on those price cuts. So you have to think about the customer reactions before you initiate a price cut. It's the same thing really with price increases. You have to have justifications for them, okay? Justifications for, initiating price increases is when demand exceeds supply, okay? Again, toilet paper, okay? When the COVID pretty much started. When demand exceeded supply, a lot of people went crazy on not only the toilet paper, but on the sanitary liquids and soaps and so forth, okay? Sometimes your costs can go up. Sometimes government policies justify price increases, okay? Or another way to do it is, from your perspective, you want a clean slate and you want to just reduce and remove the price, the discounts and the rebates. Ways of looking at that, okay, is thinking about this, okay? The customer reactions a lot of times is, oh my goodness, the product is hot. Or sometimes they can just say, oh, you know what, that company is greedy. That's probably why they're increasing the pricing. An example that I have here, okay, for increasing prices is for my father's company. When my father retired, he started a juice company in the Philippines, okay? It was a premium nutraceutical product, okay, that he was selling, let's just say for $19 a liter, okay? And as they were trying to price it, the biggest issue that he had was he wasn't moving as much volume as he wanted. And he said that what they were really looking at was they were trying to sell to a premium, a high value audience, if you would, or consumer base in the Philippines. And so when I went back to the Philippines and I did a little research for them, I just realized that the price was at a threshold, okay, wherein the higher value people thought that it was cheap enough for those who were not wealthy enough, to buy it. So I actually recommended that my father raise the price from $19.99 to $22.99. So he actually ended up, reacting poorly, but he decided he was going to go ahead and do it. He increased the price, to $22.99. Interestingly enough, because of that, the customers started buying up more units, and it actually went against, the standard economic trope, if you would, of higher pricing equals lower volume. Because what people started thinking was, oh my goodness, this product is hot, right? And they started buying it up. So he ended up selling more units at a higher price and got better volume or better profit margins, through that. Okay. Things to think about from pricing changes. You certainly, when you're responding to pricing changes, the questions that occur, why did the competitor change their price? Okay, when you're thinking about your competitors, is the price cut permanent or is it temporary? What is the effect on market share and profits? When they're, how will my competitors respond when I go ahead and initiate these pricing changes? Okay. Because there are other ways of increasing your prices, okay, in an indirect way, not just actually increasing the nominal price. And some ways of doing that is shrinking a pack size for the same price. Another way is actually substituting less expensive raw materials. Okay. One is reducing the product features while offering the product at the same price. Removing product services, okay, using less expensive packaging, and reducing the amounts of packs and sizes offered. Okay, all of those pretty much are indirect price increases, okay, that don't necessarily affect the nominal price of a product, but give you better margins. Okay, and then you can create new economy brands as well. Okay, because some ways that you can, activate yourselves to respond to competitor price changes. You can maintain your price. Okay. Now, the key here is you can maintain your price and add a perceived value, okay, through communication and advertising. Just making sure the consumers and the customers understand, why are you keeping your price at this level? And making sure that the considerations for buying your product or your service isn't just for the price, but is for the value that you are delivering to the consumer through that price. And a lot of that just comes down through your communication, advertising, marketing, okay? You can reduce your price to match the competitors. Okay, you can increase your price, okay, and improve your quality, or you can launch a low price fighter, okay, to compete with your competitors. But a big part of a lot of this really just comes down to communication, advertising, and marketing. Okay, so as we're going through a lot of this, that was a lot of stuff that we were covering. But there's some other things that I think that you guys should know. Okay, from a price change sensitivity standpoint, consumers are less likely to react to price changes when the product is more distinctive or unique. When the customer is less aware of substitutes, okay? When customers cannot easily compare the quality of substitutes to your products. When the expenditure for your product or your service is a small part of the buyer's total income, so it's no big deal for them, okay? When the cost to them is small in comparison to the total cost of their planned purchases. In other words, are the components, as a part of a total product? Usually the key from that standpoint is, if it's not a big consideration, just from a liquid perspective, from my standpoint, I won't react too much to price changes. If part of that cost is paid for by another party, okay? If the product is compatible with previously purchased assets, so I can use it a lot more times in a lot more different ways, okay? Sometimes, like I said, if they cannot store the product, they're less likely to react to price changes, okay? And the product is assumed to have a high quality and prestige, okay? So a lot of you might be asking, okay, well, you're talking about pricing. How do I determine what the prices are that I should charge my consumers or my customers? Well, one quick way of doing it is just a quick survey. How much would you pay, right? Sometimes, Survey Monkey and so forth, to any of your groups, Facebook groups and followers. Okay. Another model that's used is called the Van Westendorp pricing model. Yeah, VWPM. Okay. Is this too cheap? Is it cheap? Is it expensive? Too expensive? And you set levels and you go ahead and you give them choices among those for your product. Okay. Then there's a Newton-Miller extension to that, which is, from your perspective, measuring the purchase likelihood at various pricing levels that you establish. Okay, there's a monadic price testing model, okay, which is you present only one price point to each respondent, and you compare the purchase intent across different groups at the different price points. Right? Then, of course, there's sequential monadic, which is instead of just one price, asking these respondents the likelihood to buy over different price points. Finally, there are value maps, okay, which is comparing your product versus competitors on a price quality graph. This here is then statistics, basically conjoint analysis, which is really testing your pricing against product features. And that's really to help you determine, okay, at what price do I start pulling back particular product features or services, okay? Then elasticity models, okay, which is really using consumption data or movement data to help you run real world elasticity scenarios. I mean, this is stuff that we used to run, you know, with Nielsen, but we had data for that. From your perspective, the best way to really do elasticity models is for those of you who have websites, do A/B testing on your websites and see, you know, for a week or two, just what the conversion factors are on your websites at various prices. Now, you know, for popular pricing models, you know, I mentioned this earlier, cost-based model, a value model from your perspective. Do you give it away and you make money on advertising? And this would be for anybody who's in blogging or content production, okay? Do you bundle prices with a paid service, okay? Freemium hybrid models, okay, which are more a matter of offering, you know, the best kind of service as a freemium, okay? Then, of course, there's tiered or volume pricing and market pricing, which is what the market determines. Feature pricing, which is good, better, best. You know, you get something good, it's this price. You get a feature added, that's better, it's this other price. You get something with another feature added, and that's best. Okay, it's going to be at another price. That was actually a big part of how we used to sell things. I used to work at Sears in the home and garden division, and that was pretty much how we would sell our tools: good, better, best. You know, which is really feature pricing. Okay. Then, of course, there's a razor and blade model, which is essentially, I'll sell my razor for really, really cheap because I'm going to make my money off of the blades, because that's where, you know, that's a product that they're going to buy on a regular basis. Okay. So there's some levels of pricing improvement for you to be thinking about from your perspective. Who are you? You know, as pretty much as a pricer. Are you a firefighter? Will you be just creating your pricing ad hoc and reactive? Will you be a policeman? Okay. Will you be controlling, enforcing, and will you be accountable for the pricing that you establish? Will you be a partner? And this really just works mostly for services. In other words, will you be communicating with your clients and trying to figure out, okay, is this service working for you? How can I improve it? You know, and how do we price accordingly? Okay. Are you a scientist? In other words, are you going to be using elasticity pricing analysts? You know, or are you going to be a master, which is what I ideally would like everybody to do, which is pretty much continually improving your pricing and tweaking. Okay, so that's it for me.
Thanks, Tim. So now we're going to take some questions, and we'll answer as many questions as we can. Mm-hmm. So the first question is, what about pricing and price inelasticity for business-to-business customers? Tim?
Oh yeah, the key from that standpoint, okay, so pricing elasticity for business to business is a little harder, okay? Only because if you're talking business to business, then we're talking services. And the key from that standpoint is, more often than not, when I start thinking about services, a lot of the discussion actually comes down to your understanding the pricing threshold and the budgets of your customers before you present a price. Okay, so price elasticity doesn't come into the discussion in the negotiation, because a big part of B2B pricing will hinge upon your trying to understand what their budgets are and how much they're willing to pay, and then to pretty much come in at that price.
Thanks. Do you have any thoughts for non-packaged goods as opposed to services?
I guess I don't understand what non-packaged goods are.
So I guess, let me clarify. I think the question is, so what are your thoughts for services as opposed to goods? Yeah.
So, okay, so that's a good question. So the key from my perspective, and a big part of pricing, okay, and this is going to be very important for all of you as entrepreneurs, because I can tell, okay, just across the board, that most everybody in this group is very nervous about the pricing that they give their customers. And a lot of times, for those of you who are in our services, you will offer a price and you will worry about whether or not you gave the right price. So the exercise that I want everybody here who is in services and you offer a price, give the price, then count to 60 in your head while you're staring at your customer, because usually the reaction is just to lower the price straight away. Okay, so the key from your standpoint is to stick to the price as much as possible. And that's a long way of saying, and I'll give an example of a customer that I had, which was a business to business, okay, customer. And basically he was a graphic designer. Okay, and he worked for some of the largest food brands and went ahead, started his own agency. He determined that he was going to be selling his packaging, design services to boutique niche food brands, okay, that he would meet at like the fancy food show. And there was this one particular customer that he thought would be very important to work with. That customer had come to him and asked for a branding exercise. Normally, he would have charged $10,000 to this particular customer, right? But he figured he wanted to work with that customer so badly because that customer had all these other brands. So he gave him a discount, if you would, of $5,000. So that was his quote, $5,000. When normally he would have charged 10. Sure enough, that prospect came back and said, "I'll pay you $3,000." Okay. So how was he to react? So he goes ahead, he gets back in touch with me. He was like, "Tim, how should I react to this? I really want to work with this guy. It would normally, I would normally have charged $10,000, decided to charge him 5, but now he's offering me 3. And since it was a service and he didn't have fixed costs to take in mind, in other words, he didn't have materials to buy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I told him, go ahead, tell him, okay, cut me a check for $3,000, okay, but I'm not going to work for less than $5,000. Cut me a check for $3,000 and I'll take either a percentage of your sales moving forward until we hit $5,000, or you will give me $200 a month for the next 20 months until we hit $5,000. Okay. When he went back with that pricing scenario, the customer said, "I appreciate you, being flexible, but I'll find a way to get you the $5,000." Okay.
Thanks, Tim. So how do you determine your strategy pricing if you have a startup business? And can you speak to both product businesses as well as service businesses when you're just starting?
When you're just starting. Okay, a big part of when you're starting is really to determine, who are you as a business and what do you represent in the mind of consumers from your standpoint. So a big part of it is really looking at the competitive landscape and trying to understand wherein you find yourself being. Okay, do you feel that you will be, a premium brand against all the competitive set, or do you feel that your best bet is actually to offer the value brand along those lines? Carolyn will be discussing this later on, but a big part of what's going to determine how you position yourself is going to come down to, from a product perspective, okay, what are the costs that it's going to cost you to make your product? Okay, because that will determine pretty much the pricing that you're going to have to offer. From a services standpoint, the key then is for you to really look at the competitive landscape and identify from your standpoint, what does one particular competitor offer? What does another one offer? What can I offer different from all these others? Okay, and that will help you position yourself and to determine your pricing strategy of how you want to enter the market.
Thanks. If the product is a service, how long is the intro cycle?
If a product is a service, the intro cycle would be very, very similar to to a product as well, in so much as a big part of introducing a product and or a service is built on your ability to build anticipation for your product and your service. The truth of the matter is, for any one of you, before you actually start selling, what you want to do is certainly you want to prime the pump. Okay, so you want to find out how interested are people in your product and service. So then what you want to do is build the anticipation for that. In other words, usually the actual introduction of your product and service is going to come after you have vetted the potential marketplace, okay, and assess the interest in your product or service so that by the time you come in, it's the right time.
Thanks. What is the best approach to gain access to your competitor's pricing structure if you're in a B2B service business? Do you have any advice on that?
Yeah, the Google is your friend, interestingly enough. Okay. Now, more often than not, a lot of your competitors will not put their pricing on their website, and that's to be expected. Okay, some of the best ways of doing it sometimes is to get interns, okay, to hire interns to ask for quotes from your competitors, and go ahead and get in contact with them. Most of your competitors will have a contact us section on their website anyway. You can have an intern or an employee get in touch with them, okay, and just ask for a pricing sheet. You'd be surprised how many do provide pricing sheets.
Can you elaborate on something you said earlier? If a consumer thinks you can charge more for your product, you have lower price elasticity?
Okay. Yeah, basically, yeah. When low price elasticity basically means that a person is going to buy your product irrespective of the price. So in other words, if a person believes, okay, that you would charge more, but they really want your product, that's low price elasticity. The best example that I can give, okay, is for anybody who's interested in watches, okay. There is a huge secondhand market or gray market, okay, for premium watches. In other words, from these people's standpoint, they know that a lot of these watch brands are, can charge as much as they want on the gray market, and they'll still buy them. Okay. In other words, premium watches have low price elasticity because people will pay whatever they can to get the product.
Thanks. When you're looking at a competitor's pricing, should you try to match the price or go over their price in general?
That really depends, okay? Because a big part, and you will see that again as you review the presentation. The key from your perspective is really to understand, how are you different from your competitor? What is your competitive advantage against theirs? If sometimes the best competitive advantage is to offer a value price, okay? On the other hand, if you honestly believe that you deliver better value, better quality, then by all means, charge a higher price. But the key from that standpoint is to identify what that quality is that you are delivering to justify the price that you're offering.
Thanks. Speaking of the freemium hybrid model, what is the impact of the customer perception if you bundle a free service with a product? How will the service be perceived by the customer when sold by itself?
That's an interesting question, okay? Because it seems that that's a lot of what's going on nowadays with the economy. But the only way I can answer that, okay, is I think that the key from your perspective is when we're understanding this whole freemium, service, bundled with a product, is really to give them the introduction to the service, okay? And the key from your perspective is to establish that threshold. This is only free, this service is only free for 6 months, after the purchase of this product, okay? Because hopefully from your perspective, you will help them understand that I need the service, okay? And that they will go ahead and pay for the service after that, after that threshold passes.
Thanks. Can pricing models be used for customer discovery, exercises, or interviews?
Ask me that question again. I want to try to
Can
understand.
pricing models be used for customer discovery, exercises, or interviews?
Normally, like when we would do pricing exercises, the challenge from your standpoint, okay, is you don't want to do this in a wide scale, because once you start, activating or exposing people to various pricing levels, then in essence, you're putting the price out there. From our standpoint, when we were looking at products and we were introducing them, we would actually go ahead and do exercises wherein we would recruit prospective customers or people who fit the profile of prospective customers and ask them these pricing questions. Okay, that way we kept it in a small group and then formulated our pricing strategies based on the feedback from those sessions.
Here's a challenging one. What would you suggest?
Oh, because the others are easy.
What would you suggest the first step for a nonprofit service product is when looking at implementing a pricing strategy for a nonprofit?
That's interesting. Okay, and it's difficult to answer that question because I don't know what the product or service is that they would be offering, you know, in the nonprofit area. I guess the key from that standpoint really is to try to get as much research as you can. Okay, with respect to surveying and asking, you know, asking consumers how much they feel is justifiable, you know, to pay for a particular price for this service, and then just look through, you know, each of the pricing models that we talked about, Van Westendorp, et cetera, you know, to see what the right kind of threshold is for pricing. An interesting thing is when you're asking these kinds of questions, the key from your perspective, okay, is to think of what people are associating with a price. Okay, in other words, the best example that I can give is, excuse me, the best example that I can give is when Coke introduced New Coke, and this would have been probably in the 80s, I think. They realized, okay, in the marketplace that they were being outsold by Pepsi, okay, because consumers enjoyed the taste of Pepsi more than Coke. So they actually did a whole lot of blind taste tests. And in the blind taste tests that they ran, New Coke actually performed so much better than Pepsi. And that's when they changed the formulation. I don't know if any of you guys remember, but what ended up happening was a huge backlash when they changed the formulation of Coca-Cola, and the New Coke thing happened. The backlash was so huge, right, that they reacted. What they failed to ask is this what you're looking for? In other words, from your perspective, is the price the key determining factor for you to buy my product or my service?
Thanks, Tim.
Mm-hmm.
Those are all the questions we have time for. We will
Okay.
have an additional Q&A opportunity following Carolyn Katz's presentation. And I will thank everybody for the questions that they did submit. We are now going to launch into pricing and profitability with Carolyn. So Carolyn, let's tell us a little bit about yourself.
I will. Thank you so much, Kendra. My name is Carolyn Katz, and like Tim, I'm a SCORE mentor. I've been with SCORE for about 4 years. I started out as an analyst, analyzing companies to see what made them successful, what helped them grow, and what didn't work so well. And pricing was always a big part of that. I subsequently worked as a banker making loans, as an investment banker. I was a venture capital investor. I started my own business. And I now work as an advisor to those, you know, people who are just thinking about starting a company to very large public companies. And throughout all of that, pricing is really important. In fact, I actually think that pricing is a business's superpower. I really believe that. So Tim talked about how much your price can do for you in terms of your brand, in terms of your positioning, in terms of competition. And that is absolutely important. Everything that I'm going to talk about assumes that you've done all the work that Tim has talked about, that you have figured out not only where you're going to price and how, but you've figured out whether you're going to be a firefighter or a scientist or how you're going to approach pricing. That's really key. But that's kind of what I consider your price is, like where you're going to set the price, or pricing strategy. Strategically, what does it do for your brand? What I'm going to talk about are tactics and structures once you have those prices in place to get your customer to do what you want. Now, isn't that pretty cool? That's why I consider it a superpower. But to know that, you have to figure out what behavior you actually want. So to do this, and don't worry too much about this, we're going to look at all of this in detail. The important thing is to remember, and this is important whenever you think about your business, that it's not about what you're selling, it's about what your customer is buying. And with that in mind, almost every business has kind of more than one product or category. Even if you sell a single service, you're a consultant, you may have short projects and ongoing projects. You may sell some things that you do in partnership with other service providers and some things that you do on your own. You know, you don't want to go crazy looking at every single item, but you want to think about broad categories: retail versus wholesale, impulse purchases versus larger ticket items. Whatever it is within your business, different customers, break it down into some categories. Look at everything that goes into that sale, and then figure out where your costs are, where your friction is, and what can you do with pricing to overcome some of those barriers. So we're going to talk about three things. First, we're going to look at basic expenses, kind of the way an accountant almost would look at them, with a few twists. Then we're going to look at what I think is even more important, which are overlooked costs. I spend a lot of time helping businesses become more profitable. And it's, of course, we always look at, could you save here? Could you spend, could you get your prices up there? Could you do this? But a lot of becoming more profitable has to do with these things that aren't on your income statement, that your bookkeeper never sees. So we're going to talk about those. And then with all of that in mind, really understanding what drives profitability in your business, we're going to think about how you can price to become more profitable. So the first thing is the expenses can be categorized into different groups. And don't worry, we're going to talk about these. But it basically boils down to, how did they change when your business grows? How much control do you have over them? You have a pretty decent control over, say, your marketing budget. You have no control over your rent. So those behave differently, and those have different impacts on your profitability. And as we'll see, and we'll look at this in a bunch of examples of this, no two businesses are the same. Two side-by-side businesses theoretically selling two restaurants, let's say, side-by-side on the same street, may have very different business models. So we're going to look at those. But before we get to that, I just want to understand what kind of businesses you have. So we're just going to have a simple poll here, whether your business is a product, a service, or a combination of the two.
Lots of responses coming in fast and furious. We're going to give it just a little bit longer. Still lots of responses coming in, so let us know, what type of business do you have? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close that poll and share the results.
Okay, great. So we've got almost half of you are services and the other half are either products or combination. That's great. We're going to talk about both. I know a lot of pricing tends to focus on products. I know there's a lot of service business out there, and I think sometimes it seems service businesses are simpler. I think they're actually more complicated. So I'm going to talk about both. My service business friends out there, be patient. Sometimes I'm going to start with products because they're sometimes easier to understand, but we will talk about services. So this is a very busy chart, and you will get this in the notes. But like I said, there are three categories, broadly speaking, and we're going to go into all but fixed costs in more detail. So the first is, a lot of people talk about cost of goods sold, or you'll hear it called COGS. This is basically the direct costs of producing your product or service. An important thing to remember, a couple important things to remember are, look at all your costs. If you what it costs you to purchase the item that you're selling, what you may have to pay the service provider or the contractor who's providing your service, it's only part of your cost. There are always other costs, and that time and labor are really important. But basically, one thing to know about COGS is it's relatively fixed per unit. Okay, you don't have it, unless you sell something, but it's pretty much fixed. If you sell widgets, and I've been in business a long time and I don't know what a widget is, I'm looking to see one. But if I purchase 100 widgets a month from my widget supplier, I probably have a higher cost than if I buy 10,000, but within range, they're kind of within range. And once I've purchased my 10,000 widgets, my cost per widget is the same. Same thing with a service business. If I'm a hairstylist, I may have premium stylists and more entry level, but again, it's within a range, and an hour of their time is an hour of their time. Variable costs are things that vary, not surprisingly, and they vary depending on whether you have sales or not, and they also vary because you can control them. So they come in two kinds of categories. One is the cost of actually completing a sale. So once I've purchased my widgets, I then actually have to sell them to someone. Depending on how I sell them, through what channel, how much explanation is involved, that may take more or less time. There may be other things involved. If I'm an e-commerce widget provider, I'm going to have to pack those up and take them to the post office and send them to somebody. So all my packaging and the time to do that is a cost of sales. Another category tends to be advertising and marketing. This is something that almost all businesses have to spend money on, but unlike your rent, nobody's billing you monthly to do it. You have some control over it. So those are variable expenses. These are things that you have to spend money on, but they either vary with or drive how much sales you're going to get. And then the last thing are fixed costs. Fixed costs are really important, and we're going to refer to them, but they're kind of self-explanatory. Rent, utilities, your accountant fees, professional fees, subscriptions, the costs of running your office. These are all fixed costs, and you have to make enough money through all of these other things to cover your fixed costs. So that's the important thing to remember about fixed costs. So let's start at the top and talk about cost of goods, or COGS. As I said, COGS includes every single thing that goes into selling your product or service, the direct costs, any shipping. So if I purchased my widgets and they had to sit in a warehouse for a while until I sold them, that is also a cost. If somebody had to ship them to me in a big shipping container, that's a cost. Direct labor, I'm going to come back to many times, very big, important cost that people overlook. And also, yes, you service providers out there, half the audience, you do have COGS. A lot of it is time. Time is super, super, super important. But you have supplies, you may have subcontractors, you may have revenue shares. We're going to talk a lot about that because that's something that's kind of tricky when it comes to pricing. Travel and expenses, selling fees, all of those things. You do have COGS. So let's look at it. Okay, here is Carolyn's cookies. Now, I looked at all of the ingredients that it took to make a batch of cookies, and it cost me $17 per batch to make 120 cookies. So the good news is it's only 14 cents per cookie. Cool. Wow, I am going to make a ton with these cookies. But it took me time to prepare the batter and make the cookies. I have packaging. And then somebody has to put the cookies in the package. Either if I'm a small business, I may do that myself. I may pay somebody to do it. Or if I'm larger, I may have a co-packer or a manufacturer who does it. Well, I'm paying somebody to do that. So look what happened. My 14 cents per cookie became, when I look at all my costs, $4.30. If I thought I was selling at 14 cents, that's going to make a big difference when it comes to pricing. I may very well lose money. So I have to know all my costs. Now I'm selling my package of cookies at $12. So I've got a gross profit, which is what we call just this, my selling price minus my direct costs, of $7.70, or a 64% margin, which is good. But let's talk for a minute about margins. People love to talk margins, and margins are important, don't get me wrong. But the story doesn't end there. So let's say, for example, that I sell pencils. I can sell my pencils for $1. I pay a penny for each. I have a 99% margin. There are not many businesses that have a 99% margin. But at the end of the day, every time I sell a pencil, I've only made 99 cents. So if I have an $800 a month rent, I gotta sell a lot of pencils to cover my rent. On the other hand, if I'm selling something more expensive, like mink coats, probably a mink coat seller has higher margins than this, but even if my margins are low, every time I sell a coat, I'm minting $500. All right. So margins matter, but dollars are what pay your bills. And this is when we get back to pricing strategies. This is something we're going to come to a lot, because a lot of the structures and tactics that we're going to talk about come to sacrificing a little margin to get the dollars of profit up. So remember that. I am always happy to sacrifice some margin if it gets you more money. All right. So that's kind of a whirlwind tour through COGS. So let's go to variable costs. As I said, they come in a lot. There are two basic categories. So we're going to talk about selling and transaction costs. And there's, you know, a whole range of these, but we're going to kind of look at two extremes. So on the left-hand side, we have a product, okay? In this case, I have a $12 retail price and a $3 COGS. So I've got a 75% margin on this. But if I've got to ship that, or let's say I'm delivering it, I have some, you know, significant sales related costs per transaction, that can eat up my margin quickly. So maybe I have a $7 shipping cost. Out of my $12, I'm only going to net $2 or 17%. But if I can sell that same customer and that same transaction, I can sell 3 items. Now my shipping costs or my delivery costs may go up. It's heavier, it's bigger, but it probably goes up much less quickly than my revenues or my gross profit. So in this case, you can say I basically tripled my margin. And most importantly, remember, dollars matter. My net, the money that I retain in my business afterwards, is up 9-fold. So that's a very important thing to remember. Sell more to the same person. Let's look on the right-hand side if I have a service. Let's say I have a marketing agency. Now I may have, as I said, everybody's got a range of services. In this particular marketing agency, I have a big $10,000 brand strategy review. It takes weeks. I go into great detail. And the good news is I make a ton of money on this. I have an 85% margin. So it's super profitable to me. But because it's so tricky, not everybody wants it. I close about 10% of my sales. So that means of every 10 customers who I start talking to about my brand strategy product service, only 1 typically buys. That's fine. It's a very profitable product. I can get by with that. But the other thing is it can take up to 3 months to close. So that means that some of those 9 that I don't close on, I'm talking to for 2.5 months before they get to a no. All right, so we're going to come back to this. But if I could get them to know faster, I would reclaim that time to talk to more people so that even if I still had my 10% close rate, I close more deals because I'm selling to more people. On the other hand, I've got this quickie kind of website review product. It's a great product. People love it. I look at your website. I tell you how you can fix it. It doesn't make me as much money. It doesn't even have as high a margin. But a third of the people who look at it buy it and they decide in a week. Now, I probably want a mix of these. One or, you know, if I can do both, that's a great business model to have this mix. But I want to understand the dynamics of each. The sales costs of each are very, very, very different. As I said, the other variable cost is marketing. Now, a lot of people look at marketing costs and think about marketing efficiency. And that's clearly very important. Up here at the top, I'm looking at marketing efficiency. So if I spend $100 a month on advertising and on average, I get 50 new customers, that's a $2 customer acquisition cost, or what we call CAC. Okay, fine. That's could, depending on my product, that could be fine. You know, as long as I make more than $2, that's a profitable customer. But let's look what happens next. Once I got that customer, there are 2 things that can happen. The first one we addressed on the last page, which is how much do they buy, right? So they have they place an order. If they buy only 1 item, because I'm saying I have about $7.50 gross profit, $5 of shipping costs, so I have $2.50 of margin after shipping costs. So with my $2 cost, even if they just buy 1 thing, I make 50 cents. But if they buy 2, I keep more of that profit. I make 8, and 5, I make $30. And the other thing to think about is how often they buy. I only had to acquire them once. If I can get them to come back, right, now my profit goes up and up. And of course, if I can get them to buy more and come back, it's even better. But this is another key element. Repeat customers. when we start to think about profitability. Now, another thing is, I've mentioned this before, every business is different. So how you sell and where you sell makes a big difference. Let's look at product business. Let's say I have a beauty products business, and if I have my own store, okay, my direct cost of sales is basically what do I pay my, the people who work in my store, let's say. Transaction costs direct cost of sales is, however much I pay for my product. It's medium. My transaction costs are how much I pay my sales staff. Marketing, I spend some on marketing, but I've got a physical location. I'm probably relying on people walking by. So that's also medium. It doesn't take a lot of operations and support. There's not a lot of behind the scenes maneuvering. So I save some money there, but my big cost is my store. I have a lot of fixed costs. Now, if I sell that same product wholesale, all of a sudden sales is not a big deal. I have relatively few customers. It's straightforward. I sell to them. I don't necessarily do a lot of marketing. I may go to trade shows. All of these things turn green. But these are bigger, more demanding customers. And all of a sudden, I may need more logistics people. I may need to pay for a fancier warehouse or somebody who can really deliver because I have these different types of customers. And again, my fixed costs are high. I sell that same product e-commerce, and I've got a really different model. Now, again, my direct cost of sales is about what it was in my store. My transaction costs, as we looked at, may or may not go up depending on, how efficient I can be, how much I can sell in every transaction. I have lower fixed costs. I don't need that big fancy store. I don't need that warehouse anymore. Again, I may have a little more operations because I got to ship stuff out. My big cost now becomes marketing. There's nobody walking by my website. I've got to get everybody there. So I'm selling the same thing. It could look very similar, or I could have a physical store that also has an e-commerce arm, and I'm going to have these two very different cost structures. Same thing for services. So location-based, I was talking about, let's say a spa, beauty salon, any place where you do a service in a physical location. Here again, I'm not spending probably a lot of time selling. Transaction costs are what they are. I may need to do some marketing. I have a physical location. I have, a more complex service. I may have some operational support, but again, it's a physical location. My big cost is my fixed cost. If I'm
Carolyn, can you clarify what the different colored dots mean?
Oh, so sorry. Yes, green means not a problem, less of a problem. Yellow means medium, and red means it's a big deal for me. So like a stoplight, green is go, yellow is watch out, and think about it, caution, and red is watch out. Sorry, thanks for asking the question. Let's say that I work remotely. So like I'm a personal trainer, and in the pre-COVID days, I would have said that I maybe went to people's houses. Maybe starting that up again, maybe I do web-based service, but I don't have a fancy gym where I work out of. Now, I have to sell a little more. Again, my transaction costs are not that high. I have little or no fixed costs. But again, marketing's my big deal. I've got to find a way to get customers. They're not walking by my gym. I've got to go out and get them. So my cost basis shifts, and that's where my big problem is on marketing. Let's say I'm a consultant. And I saw in the chat before, there were a lot of questions about consulting. I love talking about consulting. Here, believe it or not, because people really forget about this, a lot of it comes down to that cost of sales. Think about the example I used with the marketing agency, which is kind of consulting. If you have a long sales cycle, if your close rate is, and it's never going to be 100%, if you have a leakage, that's what we call, not closing everybody, that is really where your costs are. You may miss that, but believe me, for most businesses, that's where your costs are. There's not a whole lot of transaction costs. You may have some marketing, but it's not a lot. And then depending on what you do, so orange is between red and yellow, because I know I used that a couple times when I couldn't make up my mind. depending on your business and depending how you structure it, and we're going to talk about this when we get to pricing, that may or may not be an issue for you. And again, you probably don't have as much fixed costs. So again, even within the services, within products, what you're selling to whom matters. And who is your customer? Customers are very different. Let's say I've got a boutique. I have very different kinds of customers. My first customer comes in, looks around, knows what they want, buys it, and walks out. But they bought that one thing. I don't know if they ever come back again. Didn't take much time, in and out. I've got another person who comes back a couple of times, wants to ask a couple questions, loves my stuff, posts about it on Instagram, invites their friends, but takes a lot of time. Now, both of these are good customers. I probably want both, but I got to understand which is which and what they do for my business. And I also may want different mixes of these customers at different times. If I run a store in the holiday time, I may want more of customer one. I may want to put my my product into packages or bundles, or make it easier for them to buy, get in and out, whatever I need to do so that I can sell more because it's my busy season. Same thing for services. Let's say I'm a tax accountant. In March, I probably want to incentivize speedy service. So I may get better pricing if you fill out my worksheet ahead of time, right? That way I can, I may be able to process, if I give a 10 or 15% discount and I can process 2 tax returns in the time it took me to do one, if I had to do the extra work, that's a win-win. In May, though, once tax season is done, I may want to do these big fancy consulting type projects. I may want to have a package or a bundle that says, come back and let's talk, book an hour with us. And we will talk about tax strategy for next year, and we'll give you a discount on next year's tax return. I've got the time. It's a time to build up some of those customer relationships, cement in that tax return for next year. Different things at different times, depending on what the business needs. And now I've mentioned time an awful lot. Time, it's an old saying, but it could not be more true. Time is money. If it takes longer, if it takes you longer, if it takes an employee longer, it is costing you money. Okay, so employees, people kind of think, well, I'm paying them for the 8 hours anyhow, it kind of doesn't matter, but it does. If you can use them more wisely, if they can be more efficient or effective in the time they're there, that is good. So let's say I have a hair salon, and my receptionist is there all day, fixed costs, no matter what I'm paying him or her. But if my pricing is really complicated, and that receptionist has to spend a lot of time on the phone trying to figure out what service somebody wants because my pricing is so complicated. And then they have to explain it again once somebody comes in and they're checking out from the service. That's time that they're not spending upselling the customers. In the time they spent explaining why this costs $85 versus $75, perhaps they could have sold some, conditioner to that customer instead, and I could have had a happier customer with a bigger sale. So using your pricing wisely can really help on that side. And this is really, really important when it comes to your time. Yes, as a business owner, you are going to work really, really hard. You're going to work lots of hours. You do not even want to think of what you're being paid on an hourly basis, especially when you're starting out. But your time is never free. There are 2 things to remember. The first thing is what we call opportunity cost. Opportunity cost is a fancy way of saying, what else could you be doing? All right, you can have opportunity cost of money. What else could you be doing with that money? And there's a big opportunity cost to time. As we talked about with the marketing example, if I could get to a faster no with some of those customers, spending all that time talking to them only to get to no is a lost opportunity cost. If I can reclaim that time, I can spend it more effectively. The other thing is, if you are not making enough to cover your time, you will never be able to pay somebody to do it. Back to my cookie example. If I, let's say, did not figure in the cost of the time to bake the cookies or the time to put the cookies in a package, as I get bigger, I will never be able to afford to pay anybody else to do that. And I will be trying to do $1 million cookie business while I am still baking and packaging them all. And you know what? I don't know for sure, but I do not think that will be a successful strategy. So you've got to figure in the cost of your time. Couple other pricing considerations that I just want to note. Stranded inventory. People tend to get really hung up on, I bought these awesome purple scarves last winter. I loved them. They just didn't move. They cost me $50. I've got to make a profit on them. After a certain point, you know what? No, you don't. That is kind of opportunity cost of money. If you have 100 of those $50 scarves, that's $5,000 that you have stuck in purple scarves. If you can sell them, you will free up that money to buy something that people will like more. Uncertainty also costs you money. All right. If you don't know how much you're going to make or when you're going to make it or when the money is going to come in, you can't really plan. You can't staff. You can't prepare. You might not have enough inventory. You might not have enough staff. You might not have enough boxes. So being able to smooth things out really has some value. And again, we're going to come to this when we talk about pricing. All right. So the background is done. We're going to move on to how, the key here, which is how do you really make money? But let's review a few of the key concepts first. Number one, its gross margin is really nice. It's nice to be able to say I have an 80% margin, but what pays your bills is the dollars you get out of every transaction. Time is money. If it takes you more time, it's costing you more money. Figure out a way to reduce the time things are taking you. Uncertainty is expensive. Smooth things out when you can. And sales and marketing efficiencies are key. In sales, as I mentioned, time is expensive and that leakage is expensive. And in marketing, it's not just about closing that customer the first time, it's about how they behave afterwards. Now, Tim talked a lot about different, about raising prices, lowering prices, and, from a perspective of what it does for your brand. And, look, if you don't have a good brand, everything I'm talking about is secondary. So all of that stuff you talked about is really crucial. But I'm a numbers person, so I want to show you what this looks like in numbers. I've got a hair salon. I'm charging $100 on average, for every haircut or color or whatever, on average. And I've been seeing about 250 customers a month. I'm doing fine. I'm making about $2,000 a month. But I decided, you know what? It's about time to raise the price. Now, so let's say I decide to go to $120. And let's say in the first example, I lose 10% of my customers. Okay. Now, importantly, so I have, my revenue. Now, in this case, and this is something I'm going to come back to, I share part of my revenues with my stylists. So one thing about raising prices is I don't get to keep it all. Some of it goes right out the door to my stylist. That's fair. They're working harder. They deserve more money. But when I'm thinking about pricing, I got to remember that. My COGS follow suit. Now, I may need to advertise a little more. I'm going to need to explain, as Tim mentioned, if I've got a higher price premium product, I may need, to explain why I'm raising my prices, why I'm at this higher price point. My fixed costs are what they are. So I've made more money, and yeah, it flowed through the bottom line. That works. But if I instead of 10%, I lose 15% of my customers, all of a sudden things are different. All right. Again, I'm not keeping all the money that I raised. A lot of my higher prices are going back out to the stylist. I still have the higher advertising, and my net profit went down. And I lost a bunch of my customers. So, you've got to be careful. Now, I do want to say one thing, and Tim said this as well. I do not in any way mean for this that you should be afraid of raising prices. there are so many small businesses that I talk to who come in, and I don't even really have to look at their P&L. I just say, you should price higher. People who, if you are full up on capacity and you've got a waiting list and you still don't feel like you're making enough money, that's a pretty good sign you can raise prices. A lot of small businesses are afraid to raise prices. Do not be afraid. Just understand what's in it. That's all this point of this chart. As Tim explained, though, that doesn't mean necessarily that you can discount your way to success. Tim explained all of the things that can happen to your brand. Obviously, if your pricing is going to go down, you're hoping that you're going to draw in enough customers to offset that. We looked a little bit with sales about the different quality of customers. Will those new customers be good customers or not? Will they only love you when you have the discount? We don't know. And the other thing is the discount applies to all customers. So if I put a big sign in my store window that says, today only 35% off, and let's say, unlike Tim's auto sales example, it really is just today only, however many customers that were just coming to shop there anyhow, I'll also get the discount, which is nice. Maybe they're regular customers, but we'll see there's other ways I can reward them that may do more for me without, just handing them money for something they were going to buy anyway. So some examples, and we'll talk more about these and, give some examples, are a loyalty discount. There's a good reason every coffee shop, sandwich shop, so many different businesses have loyalty discounts. Remember back to that chart about marketing efficiency? Getting that customer to come back is super, super valuable to me because I don't have that customer acquisition cost. So again, if it cost me, in that example was $2 to get the customer the first time, if I give a loyalty discount, of one item, buy 10, get one free, and that ends up being, 10% or something, that's a savings to me versus going out and getting a new customer. And I have a happy repeat customer who now says, oh, I go to Carolyn's coffee shop all the time. I may get more customers that way. Refer a friend, that leads me to the second one. I love refer a friend. Refer a friend is, unlike, say, a Facebook ad, you are only paying when you have the transaction, right? So I would pay, it might be that if it cost me $2 to get any old customer, I would pay at least $2 in a refer a friend discount because I've got a good customer who's been referred by their friend. Think about the things that your friends recommend to you. That's much different than something you saw on Facebook. And another thing is a discount for a future sale. So again, to that example where I have the sales, if I didn't have the sales sign in the window, but I said everybody who comes in today gets a discount for the next time you come back. Now, I've incentivized them to come back. And again, I'm only going to pay that discount when they return. I'm not giving it blanket to everybody. So there's a lot of strategic things I can do that will help me rather than just a blanket discount. This is, again, I love numbers, so what can I say? Let's say, again, I told you I love refer a friend. So this is an example of a refer a friend discount. I have a store, and typically I do about 200 customers a month, and they each spend $150. And so my gross profit, and I'm not going to worry about fixed costs because I'm not going to really change. Let's say that turns out to be about $18,000. Now, let's say I give a 5% referral discount. That's nice, but it may or may not be enough to get a bunch of people to call up their friends or email their friends and say, hey, let's go to Carolyn's store next Tuesday. They're having a special refer a friend discount. On the other hand, if I give a bigger discount, let's say I use 15%, now I may get actually a pretty good take up on it. And even if my customers spend the same amount, and they might not, with that big discount, they may actually spend, I may end up netting the same 150. Because a lot of times people are like, oh, I've got a 15% discount, I'll buy one extra thing. Which, remember, buying more per transaction is really good. But even if they don't do that, I still make more money. I spent enough money to incentivize people to use it. And beyond that, remember, this is just what I make in that month. If even some of those new customers come back a second time, then my profits are even better. So let's look at some strategies. First, we'll talk about products. And Tim talked about a bunch of these, so I'm not going to repeat them in detail, but we're going to look at a couple of things. So sales efficiency is just basically, can you sell faster? Increased revenues is, will you sell more? Operating efficiencies, does it help you, like behind the scenes? Is it easier? And reducing uncertainty. Remember, I said uncertainty is expensive. So a promotion, all a promotion does basically is improve your sales efficiency, because somebody comes, it's back to that customer number one, you know, the kind of customer that I wanted in the holiday season, though I might not want a sale. They come in, they know they're there to buy, and they buy and go. They don't take up much of my staff's time. That has value. But if I can, let's say, bundle or package my products, instead of selling my shampoo, I sell a shampoo, conditioner, and comb. I've increased my revenues. I've increased my sales efficiency. It actually might take longer to make the sale because my staff has to explain why the three things work together. But relative to selling the three items individually, it's much more efficient. It's a little operating efficiency. I kind of know what I'm selling, and it reduces my uncertainty a little bit. Tim mentioned razor and blade or subscription sales. This is not right for every business. I see people all the time now who want to have a subscription business. May not be right for you. But if it is, increases your revenues, increases your sales efficiency, increases your operations, and really reduces your uncertainty. The money keeps rolling in. Upsells are not only a way to increase revenue. Upsells are, basically, if you buy this, we recommend that you buy it. And you can work with your staff to have those kind of prepackaged. Again, helps your sales efficiency. And and Tim talked a lot about feature pricing or volume or tiered pricing or volume pricing. That can help you sell more, and it also increases your efficiencies. The same is true for services, though. There are a bunch of different strategies that you can use with services. So one thing I said, I love to talk about consulting. I know that you cannot do this in every kind of consulting business or in every kind of service business, but to me, from a purely financial perspective, if you can go from an hourly price basis, cost basis, to a service or project-based cost structure, I am such a fan. It's a little more efficient sometimes, because you now don't have to explain how many hours this will take and whatever. You just say, I am going to do your brand strategy and it's going to cost $10,000 in the example we used earlier. More importantly is operating efficiency. Couple of things. First of all, immediately, when you price hourly, you will spend a bunch of extra unpaid hours tracking how many hours you spent and then reconciling it and arguing about it and getting paid for it by the client. If it's by the project, you don't have to do that. And for that reason, and it reduces your uncertainty. If your hours change, it doesn't matter. The other thing about project-based is as you get better, if my first brand strategy review took me 20 hours, my second one may take 18, and by my third, I may be down to 15. There's no particular reason why I should get paid less. I'm actually getting better at my job. If I price by project, I make more money in less time, or I make the same money in less time. Any kind of a retainer or recurring business, recurring charging structure or membership reduces uncertainty, makes your sales more efficient, and should increase revenues. And you can have all kinds of memberships. You might have, the monthly haircut. You see this a lot in like spas or yoga studios or things like that. Buy a monthly package. The money comes in regularly. So anything that you can do. I have a crazy business, and I use this as an example all the time, so I have to go in and see how this works. But I have a place on my street that does Botox, and they have a monthly charge. And then when you come in and get your Botox, you can, you pay them every month, and then you come and get your Botox, and it's lower price. So I guess it works for them. Then there are two different ways. I'm going to actually switch these up. Tim talked about sort of a lower introductory price. That can work a lot. We talked about sales efficiency. If, instead of spending 4 hours talking to somebody about your service, you can start having them use the service at a lower price. You're saving money. And if they hate the service, you know what, they're going to hate the service after 4 hours. You've saved the time and gotten to a faster now. But they may like it, and you're getting some revenue, and you get them started sooner. The reverse of this, which can also work, is to charge a higher upfront fee and a lower recurring fee. A lot of times in business to business, that can work. They like to have their operating expenses, they may have a budget for kind of one-time special costs or introducing a new service, and then they, on their ongoing budget, it's a lower fee. So again, Tim talked about knowing your customer. That can work as well. We're going to talk about tiered pricing. I'm a big fan of that for services for many reasons. I really think it helps both your sales and your operating efficiency. And then Tim mentioned, in his example, success-based pricing. That's a little iffy. But if you really believe in what you're doing, and if somebody's going to make a lot of money off of your service, it can be a good structure. So pricing and sales. I've mentioned a lot about this, so I'm not going to spend a ton of time on it, but if you can, make your pricing easy to understand. The two things you want to do is make that initial yes easy. So introductory pricing, a trial period, anything like that that gets them started faster is better for you. And the other thing, the thing that's hardest for small businesses is a fast no. So don't negotiate. Sometimes you have to negotiate, but limit your negotiation. Have standard, easy to understand packages or pricing. If people aren't going to like it, they're not going to like it. They may not be for you. Get to that no faster and reinvest that time in finding a customer who wants your service. Bundles and tiers. I said I was going to talk about this. Especially, it can work for products. It can work for services. It can work for a combination. You may have a hair salon where you have get your hair cut every month and get a package of product as well. You can certainly combine products and services. It can improve the value perception. It's easier to sell. It eliminates that upsell, which people are uncomfortable with. That it sells more to one customer. Tiers, let's say in a service business where you say, like, this is our gold package, our silver package, and our bronze package. A lot of times gives context to what your features are. Let's say I'm a personal coach. It's going to be hard. I know what my services are, but my customer may not. If I put them into packages, this is what I'll do for $200 a month. This is what I do for $500 a month. This is what I do for $800 a month. All of a sudden, the customer, start to understand what those different individual items are a little better. My comparison pricing is built in. It makes that decision easier. It gets that easy yes. So think a lot about things like this. So with that in mind, let's look at some particular strategies. So let's say I have a beauty products business. Now, high touch retail, let's say, is a store. Here, my issues are going to be, I've got high fixed costs, so I need higher volume, and I want to maintain a decent customer service. So I want to have depending on what I'm selling, pricing clarity. I don't want my staff spending a lot of time talking about prices. I want them to sell and help the customer and reinforce that service quality perception that supports my brand. Where I can, I may want to have, sort of a razor and blade type pricing. Upselling, bundles. Bundles not only can help me sell more, it can help me clear out old inventory. It can help me introduce new inventory. Something that's new, I might bundle in with something that people really like. All of a sudden, they're liking that thing too. And I said, another thing, I want that volume. I want those repeat customers. So anything like a discount on future sales, refer a friend, that gets my volume up, that gets my repeat sales up, going to cover my fixed costs. Retail, let's say a low touch, maybe like a wholesale. I sell mostly wholesale. I sell a few things to larger customers. Now I still have high fixed costs. I don't have the sales costs, but operating costs are important. So here, bundling, tiered pricing that pushes a higher volume. If it's the right kind of business, if you're pure B2B, you're not going to have a loyalty card necessarily, but you can still give discounts to good customers, which accomplishes the same thing. Anything that keeps my customers going, makes them happy. That's what I'm going to want in that business. And online, as we said, fixed costs are not the issue. Marketing and transaction costs are. So anything that gets me a repeat customer, refer a friend, repeat discount on future sales, anything that gets me to a price point. There's a reason why so many online sites say, spend $50, get free shipping, because shipping is expensive. As we saw in the model, if I can get more in that one transaction, my profitability goes way up. Services, same thing. It depends what you're doing. There are a lot of different strategies. So if I have a spa or salon, I've got high fixed costs. I want to bring people in. I may want to bundle products. There's a reason most hair salons have that, big display of product right near the checkout, because that really helps their transaction value. Try to upsell. Oh, you're getting a haircut. Would you like a color? Would you like some highlights? If I don't have that fixed cost, if I'm a remote service business, then marketing efficiency is really important. That introductory pricing, tiered pricing, making it easier for people to say yes, really important to me. If I'm a consultant, as I said, marketing and the sales time is really important. I talked a lot about project-based pricing. If I can get some upfront fees, really important, a retainer, anything like that. So pricing comes in all shapes and forms and sizes. But good pricing is not only good for your brand, it's good for your business. It will get you more sales. It will make you more profitable. It will reduce your uncertainty. And then you can pass on even better pricing to your customers and grow your business. And with that, we'll take some questions.
Thanks, Carolyn. So the first question is, for referring a friend for consulting, what would you offer as an incentive for the person who refers?
It really depends on the business. I'm a person, and it depends on you. I would say I probably lean towards a fixed dollar amount, because it's a little icky sometimes to give them a percentage of the sale. If they're not a salesperson, you don't necessarily want somebody telling your friend, incentivized to tell their friend to spend more. That puts them in an awkward situation, depending on the price of your service. And again, think about how much it costs you, that whole sales cycle. So if you bill out at $100 an hour and it takes you 3 hours to close a sale and you only close a third of them, that's almost 10 hours at $100 and $1,000 per sale. So if you spend $50, $100 of referral fee, you're probably making money.
Thanks. There was some debate in chat about leakage and shrinkage. Can you clarify those?
Leakage, these are not technical terms, so you'll hear them used in different ways. Shrinkage is typically like inventory loss. You bought 100 items and some were damaged and some get stolen, and that's shrinkage. Leakage, I'm talking about, so there's what we consider a sales funnel. You talk to 100 people and you get to the next stage with 60 of them, and you close 20 of them. The people that you lose along the way are leakage, at least in my terminology. You will hear it referred to in different ways. So either reducing leakage or getting those people out faster has value.
Thanks. You talked about friction in a buying decision. What do you mean by that?
Oh, sorry. I tend to I try to weed out the technical terms, but sometimes they squeeze their way back in there. Friction is basically anything that slows down the sale. Like friction is something that would like slow down your car, slow down something from moving forward. So if I have to make, back to say I said I love bundles. Back to a service provider who has 12 different individual services, and I've got to figure them out and figure out what's right for me and figure out what combination will work and then negotiate a price because I don't want to pay like the a la carte price for each of those services. That's friction. It's slowing me down. So basically friction is something that slows down the sale.
Thanks. When would you use gross margin and when would you use net margin? And which is more important and indicative of growth?
Well, first of all, there's no real technical definition of either of those. So I'm going to give my own definition. Gross margin typically, as I said, is just sales price minus COGS. And net margin can be after more costs. It depends. It could be then when you throw in just the transaction costs, or it could be you throw in like you prorate all of your fixed costs and you figure what net margin is. The bottom line is you need to know all of those numbers. At some level, you don't have to figure them out with a like complex calculation, but you need to know, your gross margin, and you need to know that you're making money at the end of the day, like net, after all of your costs. So you need to know them both. For pricing decisions, I tend to both think about and ignore, as I said, gross margin, because people get really hung up on it. And a lot of times you want to sacrifice that percentage gross margin to make more dollars of gross profit. So I'm not sure if I answered the question. But.
Thanks. How would you best manage fluctuating costs of goods sold, like shipping costs from suppliers, duties, taxes, and other fees, in order to maintain your margins?
It's a really good question, and it does happen a lot. I mean, the best answer, which is not available to everyone, is to try to pass those on in some way, shape, or form. If you can't, then things are going to fluctuate. That's an uncertainty. Uncertainty has costs, and you're just going to have to build in a little higher pricing. You can also try to do, if it's right for your product, you may try to do some kind of recurring model, subscription, razor and blade, anything like that, that will average out your sales over time so that you're getting a little bit of the good and a little bit of bad mixed in and get to a higher point overall.
Thanks. Can you go over some mechanics for employing that refer a friend strategy? For example, e-commerce business, are there apps or software for referring a friend?
Yeah, I mean, it's most e-commerce platforms that I'm familiar with make it pretty easy. You have a coupon code where you share it with a friend or something, and it automatically, once that person makes a sale, generates a coupon. It gives the friend who uses the coupon the discount immediately, and you get a discount in your cart or in your account or whatever, or just emailed to you that provides you that discount on your next purchase. If you, in a physical location, you can kind of do much the same thing. In the old days, you would do it with sort of paper coupons. Again, many of the loyalty programs or even some of the POS systems have technology built in where you can do that, in a physical location.
Thanks. Thank you, everyone, for your questions. Unfortunately, we are out of time. A lot of your questions were quite specific, so I'm going to encourage you to talk with a SCORE mentor. So let me just tell you a little bit about how you do that. So on our website, score.org, you can find the most up-to-date list. You can find a SCORE mentor. Tim talked about this earlier. We have SCORE mentors all across the country. And then again, that would be a mentor that could talk to the specific challenges, the specific needs of your business and help you figure out successful pricing for your business. Several of you asked, and yes, we will send you the recording and the slides, as well as that worksheet that Tim showed you earlier. And then We are going to ask you to complete an evaluation for today's webinar. And if you keep your Zoom open, you will see that evaluation. And it does give us very good feedback on how this webinar worked for you. And let me see if there's any, if we have another minute, let me see if we have any other questions. Can you have various mentors depending upon the need? Yes, we have mentors with a wide range of backgrounds. So yes, there are mentors. You can definitely have different mentors depending on the need you have. Also, we recommend having a main mentor that you work with. And as your needs change, for example, let's say you need help with pricing, but then later you need help with sales, your mentor can bring in a co-mentor. Let's see if there are any other questions. Oh, there was a question about, are there any spreadsheets where people can enter their data and come up with pricing?
There are. I tend to refer people to industry specific ones if possible, like pricing a food product is different from pricing, you know, sort of a physical object that you buy from a supplier. But at the end of the day, it's pretty straightforward. You know, the key is to make sure that you get down to the unit level. They're going to, you know, you're going to have, you know, hours of time, which you then have to figure out how many units you handled in that time. You're going to have, let's say, when it comes to packaging, you may buy boxes in sets of 100, you may buy labels in sets of 500, and you've got to get each thing down to the individual unit. Like, as you can see, I love spreadsheets. I tend to think it's easier to just do it yourself, but there's also plenty of stuff out there on the web. As always with the web, like, look at my strategies, usually look at 3 or 5 of them and figure out where the consistencies are and look at the one that seems to make the most sense to you. Don't go with the first one you find.
I think sorry, just to add to what Carolyn's saying, you know, with respect to food products, what people really have to do is look at the ingredients, and then what's going to happen is you're going to be buying the ingredients in bulk, right? And so from your perspective, you have to then reduce that to, you know, to the smallest divisible unit from your standpoint, and then take whatever percentage of, you know, of that ingredient that you're using for one finished product unit, and then you just go. It's all spreadsheet stuff. It's actually fun.
Thanks. Do you have advice on determining if it's better to offer 11 of the same product for the price of 10, or do a 10% discount on 10 items? How would you determine that?
Depends what the product is. If people want 11 of them, you know, if it's mink coats, you know, they probably don't. You know, if it's cookies, they may very well. So I think it depends on the product.
No, I agree with you. And Carolyn, let me just add something. Somebody had asked a question about the kind of compensation that you can give for a referral. I think, and this could be just even from a marketing perspective, from one standpoint, the one thing you could do is just go ahead and buy in bulk a large number of knapsacks with your brand name on it, right? That's a fixed cost across the board, and it's theoretically functional and useful, and it brands your business.
Oh yeah, that's a very good point. I think the question, or at least I interpret it as being more about like a high-end sort of consulting referral if you have a high ticket item. But yeah, there's all sorts of things that you can give people. I've worked with businesses that just bought a lot of like $5 gift cards, and that worked fine too. Like, so, you know, and I think Tim's idea where you're branding your business and marketing as well is awesome. So yeah, there's lots of ways to do that.
Thanks. A question came in, can you meet with a mentor from a different SCORE chapter than where you're located? And yes, you can do that. So if this person had contacted their local SCORE chapter and had not heard back, you can certainly work with people from another SCORE chapter. With that, I'm going to thank everybody for the questions. Thank Carolyn and Tim for their time. And just another reminder, because people are asking, yes, you will receive the slides as well as the webinar recording. And again, please keep your Zoom open to complete that evaluation for us. With that, thank you so much. We're going to send you a follow-up email, and in that email, you'll also have a link to the webinar recordings of all 6 webinars we've given as part of this Spectrum SCORE webinar series. So thank you very much, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day.